And we look forward to a great call. 21st Century Education Goes Digital with Oracle WebCenter. I'm your host today, Mark Cornishock, and I will introduce our agenda as we go through the hour. First off, we'll have George Sokol from Fishbowl Solutions talking about PeopleSoft Campus Solutions and WebCenter content. And then we're really excited to have Barry Hudson from the University of Pretoria to really talk about their experience utilizing Campus Solutions with WebCenter. And then finally, we'll turn the call back to George for some next steps, and we'll have an opportunity after that to have Q&A both from the web chat and from the phone lines. If you would like to send a question via web chat, please send it to all panelists on your drop-down when you see the send to, and that way all the panelists will be able to see it. I'll be reading off the web chat questions. If you would like to send it, we'll be very happy to answer questions you may have throughout from the hour. So with that, I'm going to turn the call over to George Sokol. George?
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, and thank everybody who has attended with us today. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to sort of frame up some of the issues that we try to achieve with the implementation of WebCenter, and then try to hand off as quickly as possible to Barry, because I think he has a lot of very good information. Mark, could you kindly go to the first slide, please? So I thought I'd start here because this really is core of what we do with Oracle WebCenter for not only student admission, but any process that involves extensive paper and workflow automation. These figures come from a study that was done by the Association of Information and Image Management Professionals in conjunction with Gartner and PricewaterhouseCoopers. If you look at some of the processes that we're going to be talking about today, you'll find some of this very relevant, and that is for the average organization, over 10% of all documents are either lost or misfiled, resulting, and I think it helps to result in that the average document is copied 19 times, and we've seen, working with many institutions, a large reason for having shadow copies of documents, whether electronic or paper, is the fact that the central authority that's received these documents is prone to either losing documents or not providing these documents in a timely fashion. So if you look at how the average employee interacts with information, they spend 5 to 15% of their time looking at information, but up to 50% of their time looking for the information. So the average organization, while it spends about $20 in labor filing or retrieving a document, in the instance where a document is misfiled, they're spending over $120 in labor on average. And if the document is lost, up to $250 in simply recreating that lost document. Next, please. Which I think is very relevant for organizations today, particularly those of you who have no system for either automating or managing this process, and that's the primary topic today. So if you have not already addressed this, you're probably, like most organizations we've talked with, who have more and more applications coming in, while at the same time spending more and more time manually processing student applications, manually creating a record for each applicant, and having the document where all of this information exists, and then backed up by a review process that for many organizations today is still powered by sneakers and email. Next, please. So if you are like this picture that I painted so far, you might have an application process that looks like this one here today. This is based on our interviews with other institutes of higher learning have not yet automated this, where the typical review process that exists, the application comes in, it's immediately copied across various departments, various faculty members who might be involved in the admissions process, resulting in an average admissions process that takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks on average. And if something is wrong with that admission, if there's a misfiled document, a missing transcript, or maybe an electronic file that's illegible, add another 1 to 3 weeks on top of that. Next, please. So if you haven't addressed this by now, the questions that we ask is, what if you did have the ability to reduce this process by 50%, by 75%? What would that mean to your organization? What if you were able to improve the auditability of the process while reducing your operating costs? And conversely, making it easier for students to apply, providing a faster admissions response to those students, and at the same time having a record that followed a prospective student from student, but even to alumni, and even potentially as an employee next. These are some of the promises and benefits that we find that WebCenter really helps to address by providing a centralized repository that is 100% web-based, can extend both internally and externally within your organization. So not only providing an internal system to receive information, catalog it, manage it, integrate with your student information system and other applications, but also extend your reach to the students online, faculty, alumni, employees, and providing a single source of truth for the application. Now, next please. Now, the WebCenter family of products consists of three core areas of functionality. The first of these is within a product called WebCenter Content, which provides document management, digital asset management for audio and video files, and image management. It also serves as a centralized repository not only for these documents and images, assets you're capturing and managing, but also for your applications, such as Campus Solutions or e-business or even your learning management system, while at the same time providing file transformation and conversion services so that essentially the information and the format you're capturing today, you've got the opportunity to possibly retrieve that information, actually view it years from now, maybe when the application that was originally created has long since been forgotten. And doing that within the context of archival records management, while also providing options for scanning and imaging, whether it's at the user's desktop or multifunction device, or you're doing production scanning, where maybe you're scanning and imaging all of these any paper-based applications that are coming in your organization. The second component is WebCenter Portal, which provides a secure portal for both internal and external use for applications and content, also allowing you to very easily create collaborative departmental microsites or just collaboration sites between faculty, research staff members, students, and also giving you the ability to embed applications such as your LMS, your student information system, and other applications for both employees and students. And finally, the WebCenter product also includes a web content management system for building and managing internal and external facing websites, such as your .edu sites, but also providing you user engagement practices so that you can target content, target information to prospective students, maybe based on their area of interest, or maybe the type of student or where they're coming from. The user engagement aspects of WebCenter sites helps you address that. Next, please. So if you already have systems to help address these issues, or not, I thought it would be helpful to sort of round up some of the key value propositions that Oracle provides before handing off to Barry. And essentially, when you look at the Oracle product, what I think makes Oracle's value particularly compelling are first of all, its unparalleled scalability and performance. So our experience with WebCenter has shown that it is infinitely scalable. We have customers who have petabytes of information easily maintained by an instance of the application. So it definitely can meet the demands of institutions, for example, that have spikes during the upcoming terms and semesters. It also is one of the most complete feature sets of products, as I think you start to see by allowing you, providing features to not only manage your portal implementations, your websites, but the back-end content and image management services required to support that, as well as long-term archival and storage. And then its integration capabilities based on a service-oriented architecture have been very useful and beneficial to organizations that are trying to maybe decouple some of the more custom legacy applications, application integrations that they have, by providing a very lightweight, people-based integration across not only Oracle applications such as Campus Solutions, but other third-party applications like Blackboard or other student information systems. And then finally, providing the best in breed of security and reliability, everything from being able to integrate with various different security directories such as Active Directory and LDAP, as well as Oracle's Identity and Access Management Suite, but also give a wide variety of security mechanisms that can control security based on a user's role, based on an event, or based on where a user is trying to access that information, all the while providing a single source of truth, providing the right user with the right information at the right time and in the right format. So with that, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the products, the Oracle products that have gone into the University of Pretoria's implementation. And I'd like to next introduce my good friend, Barry Hudson. Barry is the Program Director of Enterprise Systems for the University of Pretoria. Customer Barry, I think we first met up with Fishbowl at a Collaborate conference years ago.
Good.
You there?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, Barry, if you wouldn't mind continuing on, it's greatly appreciated.
Well, thank you very much, George. I thought that before we get into some of the onboarding components of what we've done at the University of Pretoria, which, for those of you who don't know, is based in South Africa, a little bit of background. We're a teaching and research university, been around for a century, 9 faculties that include medical and veterinary and so on, as well as a business school. And we have sort of 6 campuses in and around Pretoria. And we have 62,000 students, of which the bulk of them are contact students, both undergrad and postgrad. And we also have a small environment, which is a distance education environment, mainly in our faculty of education. And we have about 5,000 odd staff who are split between the sort of academia and the support environments. We can move on as I get to the bottom of the slide. So really, we've been involved for the last couple of years in a process that we've referred to as systems renewal. And over the last 5 years, we've then seen a gradual replacement of a number of the university's legacy systems, much of which was in-house developed, and a fair component of that was mainframe-based, with really an almost end-to-end Oracle solution, in the sense that we acquired the Oracle PeopleSoft ERP's environment, the whole Campus Solutions, the HR or human capital environment, financial and supply chain, as well as CRM. And then in addition to those transactional systems, we have, from an integration perspective, the SOA suite, the Access Identity Management suite. We have the whole OBIEE, or Business Intelligence environment, deployed. And we're about to commence on some of the OBIA, Oracle Business Intelligence for Applications, which is a whole data warehouse and star schema implementation that lives on top of the transactional systems. And then, as George alluded to, we have the WebCenter portal, WebCenter content, and WebCenter spaces. And all of this then integrates into a variety of non-Oracle systems using primarily the SOA suite. So we have the Blackboard Learning Management System, InnoPack from the library system, InfoEd, UVIS, and various other in-house and vendor-supplied systems. So a very extensive Oracle footprint across the organization, but with integration into non-Oracle environments. Moving on. And so, included in our initial shopping list, in addition to wanting to replace these transactional systems, we were really quite keen on trying to find tools that could allow us to create appropriate portals for staff, different portals for students, for alumni, and so on. And there was a recognition that the organization was not really managing its enterprise content successfully. And so we're looking for a comprehensive content management suite to handle the unstructured side, which includes, as George alluded to, documents and websites and collaboration and archives and the like. And at the time that we were investigating the procurement of the Oracle software, Oracle was then proposing that we use the Oracle WebCenter portal on the one hand, and then what was at the time was called Oracle Enterprise Content Management, or ECM, which at that stage was a fairly recent acquisition of a product called Sterling that Oracle had then made. And so we did some horse trading with Oracle around the portfolio of stuff, and having done a fairly extensive review of the ECM offering, we looked to include that along with our PeopleSoft SOA Access and other environments. So that was a procurement that was made back in 2008 or so. If we move on to the next slide. As you would have seen a different version of this earlier on, there are components then of that WebCenter content environment. In a sense, over time, the WebCenter portal has merged with what was called Oracle ECM. So we have now no longer referred to Oracle ECM, but rather Oracle WebCenter content. And the traditional content management, which is the document management and imaging, which is much of what the balance of this discussion is about. And then integration into enterprise apps like PeopleSoft and custom applications in terms of some of the intranet and so on. Of particular relevance is at the bottom of the slide, there are certain application adapters which Oracle makes available. And in particular, the one that we're going to deal with later on is the adapter that allows PeopleSoft to talk to the enterprise, the WebCenter content management environment. So we move on from there. Essentially, every single user who accesses any system within the organization, irrespective of their staff or students or alumni, log in through the university portal, which is then making use of WebCenter portal. Behind the scenes, they get authenticated against Oracle's Internet Directory and the OIM environment. And from that, we then detect the user's role. They might have multiple roles from Oracle Internet Directory. And depending on the role that they, or the roles that they have, they then get presented either with a single portal or a choice to migrate between portals. And so if we move on, there's a quick snapshot which indicates that once you're inside the portal, we're pushing together various notices and RSS feeds and general announcements. And in our case, we have a dual language portal. So we have both English and then a local Afrikaans language. And then primarily from a navigation perspective, in addition to that, there are two links in the top left that take the user either across to the staff intranet, if they are a staff member, or they would take the user across to a collection of portlets to which that role has access. And so if we move across to the next slide, the entire staff intranet that we have, we've been involved with Fishbowl in building out the entire intranet and the microsites within that environment. And so we provide people with quick links, and then within the normal menu structures they can navigate to various aspects of the university. I think the important thing to note is that from a university perspective, all of this navigation content and all of the policies and procedures and the documentation that underpin the intranet itself is all housed and located within the WebCenter content repositories. And then in addition to that, we make use of a product called the whole WebCenter Spaces, which is a collaboration environment. And just quickly taking you into one of those collaboration environments on the next slide, you have the ability within a collaboration environment to define both memberships of those collaboration environments. You can set up file folders, etc., into which you can upload and share documents. You can control, obviously, who has access to those documents. We can run wikis and so on, various analytics and the like. But essentially, all of this information that resides in these different collaboration spaces is again stored in the underlying WebCenter content environment. On the top right, if the users need to move from a collaboration environment or the intranet environment across to the various system portlets, if we slip across to the next slide, then we have the ability to then provide different users with collections of portlets that would then take them into either PeopleSoft systems, HR, finance, etc., and a variety of other in-house developed systems, HP Service Manager, for example, some of our Java-based systems and the like. And so just to give you a feel of the portal environment and the internet environment, and obviously the user has the ability to decide on the layout and the content of these portlets, or which portlets they wish to have displayed. And so moving on from there, that really provides a bit of a background of the extent to which we've used the WebCenter environments. However, this particular presentation was really to focus on the whole onboarding process within our institution and how we've used Oracle WebCenter content together with the component of that, which is document capture, and in conjunction with the adapters between PeopleSoft and WebCenter content, in order to streamline our onboarding of our students. So if we move on from there, we receive an order of 52,000 applications a year. It's a combination of our undergrad and postgrads. The bulk of those would be undergrad applications, and of those we only admit in the order of about 9,000 undergrads each year. So there's a significant amount of sorting and filtering and deciding who we can admit or not. And a significant proportion of these students also subsequently would submit applications for financial aid or university-sponsored loans and so on. And so consequently, from an onboarding perspective, the efficiency of this process is quite critical. And if we step over to the next slide. Historically, in fact, prior to my joining the organization, there was really one channel for study applications, and that was already paper-based. So the applicant would get hold of pre-printed forms, complete the form, attach to that various supporting documents, and then send that through the post or deliver it by hand. And it would then go through a whole process, which I'll get to in a minute. And then subsequent to that, we then introduced a second channel, which allowed potential students to then apply through what we call a partial web-based application, whereby they could supply various information through the web, but then we were still stuck with the supporting documents having to be sent through separately. And so in the last, in the previous regime, there was a split of roughly 60% paper and 40% was coming through this partial environment. If we move on to the next slide and start having a look at the problems that we had with the paper-based applications, it's a very human-intensive process. These things arrive, someone needs to check the completeness of the forms that the students have filled in, remove staples, etc., get the pages in the right order. We then set these things through scanning and through a OCR or ICR process, because these forms were then completed by hand, and we were making use of a product called Teleforms at the time. It would read these application forms that had been completed, transform that data, and give it over to operators to validate whether or not what Teleforms had read was accurate. And ultimately that data on the application would be loaded into the student system. But behind the scenes, they would also verify the completeness of the supporting documents. And one of the problems we've had in the past, they would then scan all these supporting documents into a single pack of single image, which made retrieval of the image later on so much more difficult, because you weren't always sure what was going to be in that pack. And as a consequence of that, it could take an operator anywhere from 20 minutes to half an hour to just merely get through the whole validation and upload and verification of the paper form. Obviously, from a data error perspective, there are often omissions from the paper forms or inconsistency between what they'd answered in Section 1 versus Section 5. And the moment you have that, you then into rework and getting things back to the student. And so incomplete submissions really did result in significant delays. And so certainly during our peak times, an application that arrived on our doorstep could take anywhere up to 10 weeks before that thing was processed and made available to the faculties to then do selection. So it's a very cumbersome process. If we move on, it wasn't necessarily that much easier with the partial web-based. I'm waiting for the next slide to come up. In the sense that whilst we had some information captured online by the student, we then had to wait for the later arrival of these supporting documents. And they still need to go through similar verification and stapling, scanning and so on. And in reality, the partial web-based study application was often less efficient than what we received entirely by paper. Moving on to the next slide, this is obviously not the only sort of process that we were running that was largely paper-based. We also had financial aid applications, which at the time were also paper-based. And that was a lot more complex in terms of the documents that needed to be submitted by the students. And so there were huge delays of these paper-based processes. Having scanned all these things and got them into some repository, legacy repository, as I alluded to earlier on, there was then the difficulty of retrieving these things because of the fact that they were scanned as a pack, you had to go through 20 and 30-page documents trying to find out what was actually inside that pack. And quite often, if the student was later appointed into our HR system, e.g. as a tutor or something of that nature, then the HR system would say, we need identity documents and other submissions from you. So the whole student had to resubmit these things again and again because documents were almost lost within packs. And so moving on, having gone some way towards the implementation of PeopleSoft Campus, we then turned our attention to saying, how can we actually improve the whole student onboarding process? The objective there being to remove as much paper as possible, to substantially reduce the time taken from when an application was submitted by a student to when it was available to the faculties from 10 weeks down to something like 2, streamline the whole process for financial aid, provide easy tools for people to upload documents, and then simplify the retrieval of documents, but also to do so in a secure way so that certain categories of documents weren't visible to everyone. So those were our key objectives, and then from a strategy perspective on the next slide, the sort of 4 major legs on which that strategy was executed was we moved across to complete self-service via the web from an application perspective. We outsourced the whole scanning and uploading and classification of documents, extensive use of workflow to alert people to documents that had arrived, and then the combination of both data centralization and PeopleSoft and document centralization. So a little bit more detail on these 4 strategies on the next slides. From the web-based application perspective, currently any student can then come in through our internet website, find the URL to log on online. And so we developed an entire web-based application, all developed in PeopleTools, which is the underlying PeopleSoft technology that allows both prospective and current students to apply, either for undergraduate or postgraduate. And behind the scenes, we integrate that application into the rest of Campus Solutions so that once we've been through the validation of the data in the self-service application, we will pass that information on to PeopleSoft admissions tables. And it was then driven from the rules within PeopleSoft. And of course, you then have the advantage that you can fully verify the applicant's data as part of that submission before you actually allow them to submit. So the first strategy was then getting that into a web-based environment. The second part, leverage that web-based application, if we move on to the next slide. And when I spoke about outsourcing, essentially we outsourced the whole scanning and uploading and classification of either mandatory or optional documents to the study applicant themselves. So you give us very detailed instructions and say, every single document you upload, you need to scan. You can scan into any format as long as it's PDF, and you need to upload these documents as separate documents. And so they have functionality within these self-service applications to do the upload. The application itself will determine what documents are mandatory. In other words, they cannot submit an application to study unless they've actually uploaded the mandatory documents. And in other cases, we give the student the option to decide what they want to upload for a particular business process. And as I mentioned, these are all coming as PDFs. And we also then oblige the student as part of the upload process to correctly classify the document. And the whole purpose of classifying documents distinctly was to make the subsequent retrieval significantly more efficient. So you don't look for a document hidden amongst a pile. You can go directly to a specific document. So that was the second component. On the third slide, the third leg that I alluded to was to make use of workflow. So from an online application perspective, once the applicant's done their online application, submitted that after doing their document uploads, we then generate workflow alerts to different people, and we allow them to actually come and retrieve those images and verify them. And basically these reviewers ensure that the uploaded documents are legible, that they are the correct documents. If we're asking for a particular grade in school, they're not submitting the wrong grade. And if they've uploaded a legible document but they've incorrectly classified it, there's ways in which that thing can be reviewed. Should the case be encountered where the document has been uploaded as incorrect, the invalid document, or illegible, then we have tools that we can actually flag that as such, send it back to the email back to the student, reopen the online application, and allow them to amend and delete and upload alternative documents. And essentially then, as you'll see a little later on, the reviewers are not only checking the uploaded documents, but they're also comparing the uploaded documents to data that the applicant would have captured as part of the capture screens, which you'll see a little bit of shortly. So that was the third component, and then the fourth component then, on the next slide, was to centralize everything. So the data that gets submitted as part of the online application ends up in PeopleSoft admissions tables, and all the images that get uploaded, they are initially uploaded to PeopleSoft, and they're subsequently migrated once they've been verified to the web content environment, where it's indexed by the student number, the EPL ID, and the doc type, and so on. And then once these images are on WebCenter, they can be retrieved instantly from within PeopleSoft using the previously mentioned connector between PeopleSoft and WebCenter. Let's give you a little overview of some of the slides, for example. From a design approach perspective, we had acquired the WebCenter suite. Fishbowl had assisted us in the whole configuration of that WebCenter content environment, and assisted us in setting up our intranet and microsite and so on. And so we really basically elected to store any person-related document into a particular WebCenter content repository, and documents that were not person-related into alternate WebCenter content repositories, and then make use of this connector with appropriate PeopleSoft security, which then governs which documents specific users can then retrieve. So on the next slide, critical to all of this was really a comprehensive list of all the documents that the organization encountered in different processes. And so we ended up defining in excess of 200 different document types, biographic documents that might be ID documents or death certificates or divorce certificates or passports, things that relate to the academics environment, things that relate to disciplinary environments. We also use the same repository for our HR system, PeopleSoft HR, so there will be employment-related issues in there, financial aid document types, fees-related document types. And so a significant number of these document types were then defined for later use when the student actually did the upload. Next slide. And so with each of these document types, we then looked at a security component to say which of the different roles within the university should have access to a particular document type. So a variety of documents were defined as general, accessible by almost anyone, and those would tend to be biographic in nature, whereas other document types that might deal with disciplinary or remuneration information would only be accessible by certain roles. And then we also clarified when a person was involved in a particular process, of those 200 document types, which ones were then relevant to create a subset of documents that might be referenceable in a particular process. And then, as I mentioned, we developed the whole online study application. And if we get a quick look at the next slide, it's really the opening page that an applicant would get. And essentially, they would initially go to an online application page. They provide certain information, including their email address. We would then email that student a temporary user ID, allow them to change the password in their temporary ID, and then allow them to log back in with their temporary ID into an online application, giving them certain instructions on the left-hand side and a kind of list of things they need to go through on the right-hand side. If we just jump over to the next slide quickly. They would then progressively work their way through the different pages. I haven't shown you all these pages, providing personal information, their study choices, first choice, second choice, and so on. contact details, emergency contact details, information around any tertiary education if they have already been through the university or technicon, the school education, the secondary education, and then eventually they get to a step which is a documentation environment. And so if we flip over to the next slide, depending on whether they're applying for undergraduate environments or postgrad environments, the pages that they would then see would differ, but we'd give them a set of instructions as to how documents have to be scanned, how they need to be separated out, what format they need to be scanned in, information around DPI and so on. And then we would then take them in on the next slide to, for this particular application, what is mandatory and what are optional fields. So for example, from a South African perspective, we'd ask them for their national ID or that they were not a South African, their passport information, and they would simply click on the add button and upload a document into this PeopleSoft environment. Their school results, depending on whether they're still in school or have already left school, and various other optional documents that they might want to add. And so the student would simply come along here, or the applicant would click on the add button, upload their documents, and move on. And so if we flip across to the next slide, once they have completed all those sections 1 through 12, done various declarations around integrity of the application, made certain credit card-based payments to apply online, they will then verify and submit the application. And if you move on from there, having applied, this would then flow through into the PeopleSoft environment. We would send emails across to the student to acknowledge their application, and these applications are then routed through to internal University of Pretoria staff for them to then do a review of both the data and the uploaded documents. And so UP staff can either respond to alerts that they get, or they can simply go into a PeopleSoft function where they have a review of the online application. And if you flip over to the next slide, it's similar to what the student would have filled in. We just reduce it in terms of what needs to be reviewed. And typically when they get to this point, the reviewers would go along to step 6 and click on the little document review thing. Then again, these reviewers would then have access to the various images that exist in that environment. They can see the file name that the student has actually used when they uploaded, and they would typically then open that. If you click on the next slide, they would then open that particular image, and we've cannibalized some photographs here, and then be able to compare both what was submitted online with what the image is. And you'd be surprised how many people misspell their surnames and misspell their identity numbers and so on. And so they do a verification then between the image and its legibility and correctness with the data from that image and what they've captured in there on the online forms. And so moving on, each of these images then would then be flagged by the operator as either being incorrect, poor quality, the child has uploaded mixed documents, multiple images in one document, and if that is the case, we can reject it. Otherwise, each image then gets marked as being valid, assuming that it passes those tests. And so they repeat that for all the documents that might have been part of this particular student's application. And so if you go along to the next slide, they then get to a point which would say, okay, from a review perspective, are you happy that all the documents are valid? And if so, you can then submit it. And if you're not, you have the ability to return to the application, reopen it, and send an email back to the student to say, or the applicant to say, these are the things that are wrong with your particular image. So if you move on from there, once that has been done, another process then fires, and the data gets moved from the staging tables into PeopleSoft admission tables, and the faculties have then got the ability to go in and decide who to admit and not. And then behind the scenes we migrate all these images that were uploaded from PeopleSoft into the WebCenter environment and do the necessary indexing of that. So that later on, shortly thereafter, anyone who goes into the PeopleSoft environment, anyone with the right like roles and responsibilities, that goes into PeopleSoft, and then calls up the student record, has the ability to see not only the data in the admissions table, but also then to retrieve these images. So on the next slide, what we've done is we've made use of, this is just a normal PeopleSoft screen where the students' biographical details have been displayed. On that screen you can see the student number, or the employee ID, and on the top right-hand corner, People Tools functionality of related content would then transfer information like the employee ID, the student number, over to a function that allows the documents to be retrieved from the WebCenter content environment. So we jump across quickly to the next slide. As I clicked on the related content environment, it would open up a little window at the bottom of the page and says, which of these document types do you want to have a look at? And you can see there's a variety of URLs at the bottom there, and those URLs would be dependent on their roles. So depending on what we've set up in PeopleSoft as security, different URLs would appear, or no URLs would appear. And then having clicked on those general documents or whatever hyperlink, if we just pop across to the next slide, what happens the moment you click on that, it then makes use of this connector, this adapter between PeopleSoft and ECM, and calls up a grid of every single document that we have in the content management system that's linked to this particular student number or employee ID. And there you can see the different document types that then make it significantly easier for the people in the faculty who are deciding who to admit and who not to quickly get to school results or identity documents. And so if you just flip through the next slide or two, opening those particular URLs on the left will then call up the necessary documents that have been uploaded. As part of our online application, we actually create a PDF from what the student entered in the online application. And so there's a hard copy on the system, the document on the top right, which is everything they captured at the time of doing the application. We're running a little against time. Let's just move on quickly. And so it then becomes very, very easy for the onboarding of students from an application perspective to do that. And then we also have another function which is based on the same principles, which says at any point and any time in the student's life cycle at the university, they can come along and upload any documents, also through a self-service function. And it will relate to any one of a number of processes, disciplinary issues, they might have fee queries and so on. And so the students are actively discouraged from handing in any paper anywhere in the organization, and it becomes their responsibility to then do that online. And so if we flip across to the next slide, there's a separate self-service function which says, if you want to upload any document, it will drop down this to what does it relate, to what academic year does it relate, and other fields will then pop up depending on what your first two choices were. And based on that, moving on to the next slide, the student would then get a drop-down list to say, if you're applying for financial aid for 2014, these are the different document types that you are allowed to upload. They would pick it from there and simply go through an upload process to submit that. The difference here, if we just move on to the next slide, is the moment the student has uploaded that into PeopleSoft, it immediately fires off workflows to affected parties within the organization to say, Joe Bloggs has now submitted a particular document, please go and review it. So moving on to the next slide, in a similar fashion to the online application, we then have selected staff who review these documents to decide whether they're valid or not. For those people who are making use of checklist functionality within PeopleSoft, someone on the faculty might say, we need to have a medical certificate uploaded. We put on the student's to-do list. When they come into the self-service function, they upload that. We then have processes running to check for the upload of a particular document. And the moment the reviewer has said, this document's okay, that checklist then gets lifted, and that might lift blocks, etc., on the student record. And so just moving on very quickly, the review screens that the people have, that they can simply then call up either by employee ID, they can see all different types of documents with different application numbers and so on, and work their way through the list, say, is the file okay, is it legible, and so on, and then simply flag that thing. Next slide. And as a consequence of that, it's either valid, in which case we can submit it, or they can simply reject it and send it back to the student to say, you've uploaded the wrong document, or it's not legible. And so there's this continual two-way communication between the student or the applicant and our internal staff who are verifying these documents and images as they get uploaded. So if we move on to the next slide, we have a very, very similar process. Unlike our study application, where we have a small percentage of paper and the rest is kind of online now through these new functions, our financial aid process is 100% web-based. So the students apply online, they do their document upload online, and the workflows then trigger in a similar process, and all of these images then end up in the same WebCenter content repository. Next slide. So really, in summary, just doing a quick review, we have something like 52,000 study applications that we retrieve. The efficient onboarding of students is really critical. We have about 12 staff in the central team who are reviewing these 52,000 applications. We move the data from our own online application set of tables into PeopleSoft admissions. We transfer the images into WebCenter content, and we release the application then for the faculties to consider for evaluation. And in addition to those 52,000 study applications, we get about 8,000 financial aid applications coming in every year. And in addition, as I mentioned, at any stage in the student life cycle, they can submit any other documents that might relate to any other relevant process within the organization. So our second slide that deals with summary and conclusions. So, as I've indicated, that whole drive towards efficiency has really been based on these four legs, as I mentioned earlier on. Extensive use of self-service web-based applications, outsource the whole scanning and classification to the students, use workflow wherever possible to quickly alert UP staff to the fact that they need to do reviews, and then put all of the data into a single WebCenter repository where it can be very, very easily and quickly retrieved, but in a very secure manner. The third set of conclusions. So really, as a consequence of these developments that we've done, currently more than 75% of our study applications that are coming in now for our 2015 academic year are coming through as web-based things, and we expect that to rise to close to 90% as we discourage the paper process in the future. 100% of our financial aid applications are all done through the web. This is not a constraint from WebCenter content, it's more in terms of what's happening, but at times we're seeing something like 1,500 documents an hour being uploaded into our WebCenter content environment. And over the last 20 months, we've uploaded in excess of 1 million documents via PeopleSoft into our WebCenter content environment. And the final slide, I think, really talks about the business improvements. And the reality is that the moment UP staff goes into an online application and starts a review process, they can complete that whole validation of the data that was captured and the reconciliation of that data with the image that were uploaded in a sort of 5 to 7 minute time period compared with the sort of previous 20 minutes to 25 minutes. We still obviously have business cycles during the year, and we still have some peaks and troughs during which we receive hundreds of applications. We typically open our online application on the 1st of March, and by the 2nd of March we have in excess of 3,000 applications waiting for review. And so that backlog on average is reduced to less than 2 weeks at any point in time. And then the added advantage that George alluded to is that should we ever want to appoint these people into our HR system, either as permanent staff or temporary staff or whatever it is, much of their supporting documents is already in the enterprise content management system and can then be retrieved in the PeopleSoft HR or the PeopleSoft CRM or other systems. And I think that was my story. What's on the next slide?
Well, thanks, Barry. I really appreciate that. We're going to open up the last few minutes for some questions, but one quick question I have from you is, what about mobile access on campus? What are you saying, and what are you doing around there?
Look, I think that we involved in two processes. Firstly, from an Oracle perspective, in terms of access to PeopleSoft itself. Certainly there's a lot of developing being done by Oracle itself in the PeopleSoft environment in terms of fluid interfaces, so that in the future, students who are accessing Oracle, accessing PeopleSoft, would get sort of the pages rendered for whatever device they might be using. But we're about to embark on a whole process of making use of some of the web services and some of the ADF mobile environments to then develop applications for both the Android and the iOS platforms to allow students to get access to certain components of PeopleSoft through whatever device they have. Having said that, we don't necessarily see students doing an online application from their cell phone and trying to upload PDF documents from that environment. And so, the students generally have access to both their own devices as well as computer labs on the university to make use of all the self-service functionality. Certainly, I know that although we don't use it extensively, there is a mobile component as far as the whole WebCenter content is perspective, and we can also access that information from a mobile perspective. That's the point that I didn't cover, and that is that I refer to two repositories. The one is this person-based repository, where every document is indexed using a unique person reference MPID, and other documents that are not person-related. In the case of the person-related repository, there is no human being that has access to that apart from the system administrator. The only user, if you like, who has an ability to retrieve those documents is PeopleSoft itself. And so you need to first be able to get into PeopleSoft. You need to have the rights to get to certain PeopleSoft screens. You need to have the rights to click on that related content link. And you need to have rights to certain categories of documents in order to retrieve those documents. That's a slight deviation from your mobile question.
No, and absolutely, that's what we found. I mean, we have our at Fishbowl, we've done mobile projects for WebCenter, Portal, and content, and that is, that's one of the other benefits Portal has, is the mobile interfaces, being able to overcome some of those security issues. Anyway, I just want to, Barry, I want to thank you again. We're almost out of time. I want to just, on the screen, everyone, you see an offer and some contact information. If you want more information on anything we've talked about, feel free to reach out to your local Oracle team. You can send a link to me. If you want to talk to Barry, I'm sure Barry would be happy to follow up. I do have an offer for anybody who's on this call, and that is, we at Fishbowl, we're offering to do a mini scoping, and it says RFI. It's certainly RFI, but a mini scoping and return on investment study for anybody who might be interested, and basically consists of working with your team, analyzing your infrastructure, your costs, and coming up with possibly some justification for doing something for your organization. One last quick word about Fishbowl. We are an Oracle Gold Partner. We've been working with WebCenter since 1999. We're one of the oldest partners in this space, and as you can see, we've got quite a global reach with the organization.